I never told my wife who I really was. She met me during my sabbatical year. I had just sold off one of my holdings for a quiet profit and stepped away from the boardroom to breathe. I moved into a modest neighborhood under a different name, took up volunteer work, and lived off grid. No tailored suits, no assistants, no chauffeured sedans. Just me, my books, and a used Ford pickup. That's where I met Lily. She was working at a local library branch part-time while studying for her master's. Brilliant, warm, and disarmingly honest. For once, I was seen for who I was, not for the weight of my surname, the whisper of old money, or the articles printed in Fortune. She thought I was a blue-collar guy who liked fixing things and reading biographies. I never corrected her. We married within 2 years. Lily never asked about my past. She just assumed I came from humble roots and never pried. It was peaceful. But as the months rolled on, the pressure to reveal the truth grew louder. Her father, Richard Caldwell, was CEO of a multi-billion-dollar logistics empire, a loud legacy man, the kind who measured worth in quarterly growth and wine labels, and he had no idea that I was the anonymous investor who held over 22% of his company's shares. It had started as a casual opportunity. I'd bought in quietly, strategically, over years. I never voted on anything publicly. My name was buried under shell corporations, trusts, and silent boards. But make no mistake, if I wanted, I could call for a leadership overhaul by breakfast. But I didn't. Not yet. Because Lily never introduced me to her parents. Not until she received a formal invite. Come to dinner. Bring your husband. She was nervous. My dad can be intense. Just smile. Please. I smiled. Of course. What she didn't know was that I had met Richard before. Once. 10 years ago. In a boardroom where he called a junior associate a pathetic charity case for suggesting employee wellness benefits. I remembered his voice. I remembered his face. But now I was just the simple husband, the man with rough hands and worn boots who never talked about his work because he just does odd jobs and drives a truck sometimes. When we arrived at the Caldwell estate, all columns and coldness, I could already feel it. The disdain behind Richard's handshake, the sideways glance from her stepmother, the way the maid hesitated before asking, "Are you sure you're with the family?" Lily sat beside me at the long mahogany table. Across from us, Richard folded his hands, his Rolex glinting under the chandelier. "Lily," he began, "we wanted to have this dinner not just to meet your husband, but to protect you." That's when the envelope slid across the table. Her stepmother smirked. "We've taken the liberty of drafting something simple, a post-nuptial agreement, just to ensure the family's assets are protected in case." "He turns out to be exactly what he looks like," Richard finished. Lily froze. Her face turned pale. I said nothing, just looked at the envelope, then at Lily, then back to Richard. My hand hovered over the document. They thought I was poor, disposable, an obstacle to be managed. They had no idea who they were sitting across from. And I was done playing poor. I didn't touch the envelope, not yet. Lily sat frozen beside me, her hand gently trembling as she reached for her water glass. Her father's words lingered like smoke in the air, thick with implication. Across the table, her stepmother adjusted her pearl necklace, eyes locked on me like a hawk watching prey struggle. "You don't need to take it personally," Richard said, his voice perfectly measured. "It's just a precaution. You understand. When a man doesn't have anything to lose, it's easy to marry for the wrong reasons." Lily tried to speak, but he cut her off with a raised hand. "Sweetheart, I'm talking to him." I didn't flinch. Instead, I looked at him. Really looked. A man who'd built his empire by stepping over others. A man who had once voted down maternity leave proposals because it cost too much. I remembered his boardroom arrogance like a scar that never faded. The kind of man who believed silence was submission. But I wasn't that silent boy anymore. I smiled faintly and slid the envelope back toward him unopened. I don't need that, I said calmly. Not tonight. His brow lifted, amused. Of course you do. It protects Lily. No, I replied, placing my napkin down slowly. It protects you from the idea that someone you don't control could be good enough for your daughter. His smile thinned. You've got some nerve. And you've got some assumptions. Lily looked between us, now visibly uncomfortable. Dad, please. Richard turned to her. We raised you to know better than to tie yourself to someone like... Like what? She asked sharply. The question hung there. It was the first time I saw her push back against him. Her father blinked, caught off guard by her tone. Then her stepmother leaned in. We're only saying what everyone's thinking, she said smoothly. You're intelligent, educated, beautiful. And he's a good starter husband. That stung, but not for the reasons they thought. Lily recoiled. Starter husband? I could feel her slipping, doubt bubbling beneath her calm. Not at me, at them, at this whole farce of a dinner. I placed a hand gently over hers and stood up, calmly, deliberately. I looked Richard in the eye. You know what's funny? I asked. People like you only understand value when it comes with a label, a title, a stock price. But character? You can't measure that in quarterly returns. He scoffed. Spare me the lectures, truck boy. I turned to Lily. Do you want to go? She hesitated, then nodded slowly. We left the envelope behind unopened. But just as I opened the front door to leave, Richard called after me. Wait! I turned. His face was suddenly wary, curious. What did you say your name was again? He asked. My heart beat once, twice. I just smiled. I didn't. Then I closed the door. Lily and I walked out into the night. She was quiet for most of the drive. But just as we reached our driveway, she turned to me. You didn't seem surprised by any of that. I wasn't. And you didn't seem afraid of him. I'm not. She paused. Why? I looked straight ahead. Because he doesn't know what kind of man I really am yet. 2 weeks passed before the next move. Lily hadn't brought up the dinner again, and I hadn't pushed. I could tell she was sorting through the fracture lines in her family. The cracks that had been there all along, now exposed by a single envelope. But I knew something else was coming. You don't provoke a man like Richard Vaughn and expect him to leave things alone. Especially not when his pride was publicly bruised. And I was right. One Monday morning, I received a personal invitation from the board of Vaughn Dynamics, the very company Richard built from the ground up. An urgent strategic update, they said. They wanted the anonymous majority investor to attend in person for the first time. I smiled when I read it. They had no idea who I was. Not yet. The boardroom was bigger than I remembered. Cold glass, steel angles, and the aroma of $200 single malt whiskey buried deep in mahogany panels. It was a place designed to impress and intimidate. I walked in through the private entrance just before the official meeting began. No grand entrance, no fanfare. Just a plain gray suit, well cut but not flashy, and a black leather portfolio in my hand. The board members stood when I entered, all except Richard, seated at the head of the table. He looked up slowly, expecting a power broker in cufflinks and ego. Instead, he blinked. You? Good to see you again, Richard, I said with a calm nod, taking the seat directly across from him. One of the directors leaned toward him, whispering, That's the anonymous equity holder, Mr. Blackstone Capital, the one who bought 51% over 6 years. Richard's face drained of color. You've got to be joking. No, I said simply. I've been investing in this company since your daughter and I started dating. Quietly, through proxies, shells, holding firms. It wasn't hard. He stood up. You manipulated your way in. No, I believed in what you built, even if I didn't believe in how you ran it. The room went silent. Then I opened the leather portfolio. Inside, numbers, charts, recommendations, and a motion. I'm invoking Section 4.7 of the Shareholder Charter, I said. Effective immediately, I'm calling a vote of no confidence in your executive leadership. A murmur rippled through the room. One board member cleared his throat. Mr. Vaughn, we've been meaning to have this discussion for some time. Your recent conduct, financial irregularities, and... You're siding with him, Richard barked. No, I said softly. They're siding with the man who's been keeping your company afloat during its worst quarter in a decade. You just never bothered to ask who was writing those checks. His hands curled at his sides. You planned this? I met his gaze evenly. No, I gave you chances. I believed you'd grow, that you'd lead better. But then I saw how you treated the people you couldn't use, your staff, your daughter, even me, and I realized something. He stared. You never saw anyone as an equal, only tools. I stood and laid the final document in front of him, a formal motion, signed. This isn't revenge, I said. It's accountability. The vote passed 7-1. He stormed out of the room without another word. That night, I sat at the kitchen table while Lily cooked, her back turned. You've been quiet, she said gently. I met with the board today, I replied. She paused, spoon in hand. At my dad's company? Yeah. She turned around, eyes searching mine. It was you all along, wasn't it? I nodded. I never wanted you to feel like I had to prove something. I just wanted to see how deep their judgment ran. She walked over and sat beside me. I'm sorry I didn't stop them that night. You did, I said, by walking out with me. She looked down, then whispered, What happens now? I took her hand. Now, I said softly, now we build something better. 3 weeks after the boardroom vote, an invitation arrived at our doorstep. A gala. Richard Vaughn's final act as founder and CEO. It was billed as a farewell celebration, a curated night of self-congratulation disguised as humility. I suspected it was also an attempt to reclaim some dignity after his ousting. Power never surrenders quietly, especially not for men like him. I wasn't going to attend. But Lily surprised me. She walked into my study one evening holding the invitation. I think you should go, she said. Why? I asked. Because he still thinks you're beneath him, and deep down, that's the one thing he can't let go of. I looked at her. She wasn't angry. She wasn't vindictive. Just steady. And you? I asked. She smiled gently. I want him to see what grace looks like, even when you've already won. So I went. Not in a tuxedo, not with fanfare, just in the same quiet gray suit I wore to the boardroom. I didn't need anything louder than the truth. The ballroom shimmered with crystal chandeliers and the hum of wealth. Servers floated through in perfect rhythm. A string quartet played near the marble staircase. It was the kind of evening meant to impress. But tonight, it felt hollow. I kept to the side, observing. Lily was radiant, not because of the dress, but because she no longer had to dim herself to fit her family's vision of perfection. She stood by my side, not in front of me or behind me. Then Richard took the stage. The applause was polite, not warm. He stood beneath a massive screen bearing his name and began his speech. Tonight is a celebration of legacy, he said, of building something from nothing, of perseverance, and of vision. He glanced toward us, the faintest smirk on his face. I always believed success should be earned, not handed to those who pretend to know business while hiding behind anonymity. Subtle, but pointed. I didn't react. I waited, because I knew what was coming. Just as he finished his speech, the event coordinator whispered something in his ear. His face twitched, but he nodded. Ladies and gentlemen, the coordinator said, we have a special presentation, a message from the company's new majority shareholder and acting chair. A hush fell over the room. The screen lit up. It was a simple video, no flash, just the footage from the boardroom vote, projected for all to see. My name, my vote. The stunned silence of the board as they realized who I was. The signatures. The final tally, 7-1. And then, a still image, Richard's face as he walked out defeated. The screen went black. Gasps rippled through the room. Forks paused midair. Wine glasses trembled slightly on tables. Someone in the back muttered, "That was him?" Richard tried to recover. This is out of context." But no one was listening. Even the string quartet had stopped playing. I didn't move. I didn't need to. Because in that moment, silence was thunder. We left before dessert. Lily didn't say anything for the first few minutes. She just held my hand tightly as we walked through the valet line. Finally, she said, "You didn't have to do that." "I didn't," I replied. "The truth did it for me." She looked over at me, eyes soft but resolute. "You let him fall on his own words." "No one can claim I pushed him," I said. She nodded. "That's what makes it real." Outside, the wind carried the faint echo of violin strings and whispered names. But we didn't look back. We had our own music to walk into, together. The following spring, Lily and I visited the small orchard on the northern edge of her father's former estate. It had gone untouched for years, forgotten beneath corporate expansions and landscape perfection. But there, among gnarled apple trees and wild violets, something quiet persisted. Life, unpolished and real. She brought a thermos of coffee. I brought a folder. Inside it were the final papers. Richard Vaughn had formally stepped down from all remaining advisory roles. The last shred of power he'd clung to was now signed away. He did it in silence. Not because he wanted to, but because no one was listening anymore. Back at home, I opened a letter addressed to me, handwritten, slightly shaky. It was from the oldest board member, a man who once voted against me. "We didn't see you," he wrote. "We saw the mask we assumed belonged to someone small. You reminded me that power without humility is hollow. Thank you for showing us what real leadership looks like. Quiet, steady, earned." I sat with that letter for a long time, because that, not the shares, not the victory, felt like the real inheritance. Lily started a scholarship under her family name, not to honor legacy, but to rewrite it. "For students with big ideas and humble beginnings," she wrote in the mission. We funded it quietly, no press, no credit. The best things don't need applause. One evening, over dinner, she looked at me and asked, "Do you ever regret not telling me sooner?" I smiled. "Would you have believed me?" She laughed. "Not a chance." We toasted to that, not to wealth or revenge, but to clarity, to the kind of love that doesn't require explaining your worth, and to a truth most people learn far too late. The most powerful man in the room is often the one who doesn't need to prove it. Was this revenge perfectly justified, or should the storm have raged harder? Drop your verdict below. I read every single one. Hit like if you crave justice, and share this story with someone who needs its fire. Subscribe to Lauren's story, because here, betrayals don't sleep. They hunt their owners. Every shadow hides a reckoning. Every mask breaks, and every betrayal is answered. Stay sharp, stay unbroken, stay tuned.